everybody's trying to do the stuff that we normally do, but with AI. So people are building AI first. Used to be web first, used to be then mobile first. Now it's AI first. In essence, you have a AI doing all of the tasks, and when the AI fails, then the human starts.
Hey everybody, James Shepard here with another edition of the Merchant Sales Podcast. Today I get to talk to Vlad Sadovsky, and we, for the first time on our podcast, are going to interview an AI agent. I'm not going to tell you more than that because it's really cool, and you'll see what's happening there really soon. So Vlad's a good friend of mine. I do always like to qualify these things that Vlad Sadovsky and Nativia, they are a paid sponsor of, CC Sales Pro, and done consulting over the years and things of that nature. So I like to clarify that. But again, Vlad's just a good friend of mine, and really an amazing guy. One of the most interesting people in the industry, in my opinion. So this is a great interview talking about the future of AI and how that's going to change things in the industry. Then Patty and I go on to discuss the Credit Card Competition Act and the future of regulation legislation in the payment processing industry. So as always, this podcast is brought to you by Nativia. You can head over to ccsalespro.com/Nativia to check it out. And with that being said, let's interview the CEO of Nativia, Vlad Sadovsky. Hey everybody, I'm here today with my good friend Vlad Sadovsky. How you doing today, Vlad?
I'm doing great, James, as usual.
As usual, great to have you back on the podcast. I'm not going to, spoil anything here, but let's just say we are going to have another guest joining us a little bit later who looks and sounds a lot like you, Vlad. So, we'll get to that in a little bit. So,
yeah, that's not going to spoil. That's not spoil.
No one will know what I mean, right?
Right.
So, Vlad, give us, for those who again are new to the podcast, give us a little bit of background of who you are, what you do, real quick, and then we'll dive into this.
I'm a CEO, founder of Nativia, and Nativia is a fintech that specializes in payment processing and banking as a service products, including the issuing credit cards, issuing debit cards, and now we are issuing cards for a product called Early Wage Access. So it's a personal card where people can get paid early.
Love it. Great. So today we're talking about AI. And specifically, we're going to talk about how AI is kind of infiltrating the payments industry and the changes that we see there. And so my first question for you is a little bit of a broad question, Vlad. Where do you see AI right now? Are we in the kind of early adopter phase? Have we moved, past that? Where are we at today in terms of just, realistic use cases for AI and where you see it in the market today?
So first of all, and here's an interesting fact. So what's happening in AI is happening to any stage of any product that ever existed, right? So it took us 30 years to go from a Motorola cell phone to an iPhone, right? In AI, that evolution happens every 2 weeks. So just to give you the magnitude of speed that it's going, and I'm not even discussing the unprecedented money that's being thrown into this,
right?
So we're really in the stage where everything is getting tried, just like when the internet first started in 1999, and everybody's trying to do the stuff that we normally do, but with AI. So people are building AI first. Used to be web first, used to be then mobile first. Now it's AI first. What does that mean? That means that in essence, you have a AI doing all of the tasks, and when the AI fails, then the human starts. Right. So versus let me complement the human interaction or human actions and then plug in AI into it. Right. So AI first approach is quickly gaining traction, and the new companies that are trying to build everything AI first. So what we're going to see is you're going to have an army, like you and me are going to have an army of people that are, or that's called agents, that basically are going to be able to do things for us. And to some people, it's a scary reality of the employees losing jobs. But to some people, it's an opportunity to manage those AI agents and get more qualified jobs. So it's a double-edged sword. Some people are scared, some people are actually excited about it. But we're at the point where everything is being tried. And everything's been, and technology is getting faster, and companies are placing their bets. And more importantly, big countries are placing their bets, right? So, we've seen ChatGPT first came out, and United States supposedly leading right now. All of a sudden, this DeepSeek situation comes out,
Right.
which make the headlines, and it's coming out of China, and so we're going to see countries that try to develop their own models
Yeah.
and try to mimic. And who's going to win? Nobody knows, but it's a big race right
Yeah, for sure. So as we look at that big picture, right, and then if we bring that all the way down to kind of the bottom shelf, let's say for the ISO. So for our audience listening, we have ISOs, we have ISVs, we have agents. What should they be thinking about today when they look at their business? What should they be focused on to say, hey, this might be the first step for me, or this might be the area where I should implement AI in my business?
now. Well, I think that what happens is the first thing you should do is you should really get somebody with that understands this, and get it to a point where you have somebody basically setting it up for you first time, right?
Mm.
Because if you're not familiar with it, of course you can try it out. I mean, I've started doing this by looking at a tons of videos. Not too many people have time to do that. So invest time to at least hire somebody that can give you some basic things and some automation in your life, right?
Right.
So chatbots with information. Try to get yourself to ChatGPT as opposed to going to Google first, as an example,
Sure.
and then compare the answers. Although Google today now has their own AI called Gemini that will service you an information right in the Google search, because Google's trying to compete and keep that supremacy that they've enjoyed for decades. Um, but trying to think of what are the automated tasks that what are the tasks that are boring that you can automate is the number one thing that you want to think. So email automation is probably number one thing that the ISO should be looking at. Calendar management is another thing that the ISO should be looking at.
Mm.
And it's not an easy task to set up for somebody that never knows,
Right.
doesn't have technology skill. So that's why I suggest that you basically look into it
Yeah.
and have somebody do it.
It's interesting. I think that my number of Google searches has probably dropped by 90%, I would say, in the last 4 months. Using ChatGPT for that is just massively better as a general rule. Even with Gemini in there now, I just kind of feel like I don't know. Because I think what's interesting is even though Google is implementing the Gemini stuff, an action. It's like a search, whereas ChatGPT is a conversation. So you search, you get some results, and you say, well, those are interesting results. What about this or what about that? And it's like, man, it's so much more convenient.
The rabbit hole is going to be when you start talking the same question to different models. So I now
Right.
have another model that was invested by Amazon called Claude, which is a company called Anthropic,
Hmm.
and made a large investment into that company. And those guys that left ChatGPT in 2021 before it came out. So when you ask the same question to Claude and you ask the same question to ChatGPT, you're going to get completely different answers on
Hmm.
the same subject, and you quickly realize, this model is better at
At
writing a
that.
script, and the other one's better at
Hmm.
answering the question. And then you add the Chinese DeepSeek that I definitely tried. Uh, that
I
takes you
haven't
to
done
a
I
whole
haven't done
different
that one
stuff.
yet, actually. I haven't done that one yet. How is it?
It's very interesting. It basically tells you what it's doing
Right.
versus ChatGPT just giving you the answers. It's actually say, okay, user asked me to do this. Let me do this and this and that, and I'm going to come up with this logic, and I'm going to come up with this answer. So you really get to understand how
Hmm.
this AI model world works and what's behind that.
That's so interesting. Okay. All right. So one other question I have for you here before we get our next guest on. So as we think about the core interaction of payment processing, so somebody, making a payment, I was thinking about this the other day in preparation for this interview. And, you know, how do you see AI? What role do you see AI playing there, in terms of how is Visa going to be using AI? How are the banks going to be using AI in terms of the core interaction of somebody paying for something? How do you see that playing out?
Well, so one of the biggest advantages of AI is not only able to consume the data, that's machine learning,
Right.
right? But actually decision the data without much of a human interaction. Um, and that's going to go through many different verticals, like choosing your flight, as an example, right? So Visa would implement this in the fraud scenarios, for sure. We're both issuing and acquiring. Visa would implement this in the open banking that's coming, and it's going to be implemented everywhere where the decision needs to be instantaneous and quick, where the human cannot make that decision, cannot you cannot wait for that information to do it, and you don't want if then decision making. You want the analysis decision making.
Right.
That's where you're going to see AI shine.
Mm. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation with somebody else in the industry recently, and we were talking about I can't remember what they called it. I think they called it the dead internet or something. The idea of, you know, AI agents are going to be going out and like you mentioned buying a flight. It's like, okay, I want you to book a trip for me. Well, if the AI agent goes and pays for the flight using your card, and a chargeback is filed, what happens, right? It's like, did I make the purchase or not? It's like I had my AI agent go out and do it. Like, there's going to be a lot of interesting questions around the payments aspect of like once AI agents are the ones actually spending the money on behalf of other people per their instructions, you know?
Right. Of what if the AI agent is getting hacked? Right. So first of all,
Right,
let's explain to the people in the audience what is the AI agents to begin with. So
right,
everybody knows about the model, and so AI agent is in simple terms, right? Is so we have a registered ISO like Nativia, like and then Nativia has its agents, right? That are capable of doing certain tasks like signing up a merchant, explaining it to the merchant, etc. But they're not making the decision on underwriting, they're not making the decision on risk, etc. AI agent is a limited version of the AI model that is learned and explained and taught to do a certain task or a number of tasks,
right,
and then asked to execute on it.
right. So you might have a travel agent, an AI travel agent that's able to go out and purchase flights, as an example, right? So something like that that's very narrow in scope that they've been shown how to do a certain thing.
Well, I'll give you a very simple one. We're going to have customer service agents today.
Right.
Um, by the end of the year, Nativa is going to have a lot of AI customer service agents.
Right. Right. And they've been trained, and it's like you have so much data there, it's like you have all your call recordings, and it's so easy to dive
Honestly
in.
speaking, when we look at it and say to ourselves, how long does it take me to train a new agent,
Right.
right, to expand my customer service staff, and what's the quality of that level one support? I have to say that unfortunately, AI exceeds,
Right.
at least on a first level for sure.
Right.
The expertise, yeah, maybe there's still, humans can provide a challenging environment to the AI, but I think that as AI gets better, it's basically going to happen
Yeah.
very quickly, where we're going to be dealing a lot with agents, unfortunately. And
Sure.
then you and I can easily imagine you and I conversation. We're going to have a conversation like this right now, and in 5 years, your agent will talk to my agent afterwards, and they'll make the decisions and actions that we discussed here.
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I feel like I'm already doing so much of that now. Just, you know what I mean? Getting AI involved. I mean, again, it's like right now there's that issue of AI is not, we're not allowing the AI to take the final step of like the actual action, but it's like getting really close. At least for me, it's kind of like it's already telling me which things I should do, what I shouldn't do, a lot of things that are very interesting. So, all right. So with that segue, we are going to go ahead and introduce our guest here. And so we're going to get on a guest, and this guest is called AI Vlad. And so we're going to get on and see what AI Vlad might have to share with us today.
It's actually Vlad AI, I think,
Vlad
if I
AI. I got
if
it backwards.
if
All
I
right.
remember correctly, right?
All right, here we go. Let's get Vlad AI on. Hey, Vlad AI.
Hey there, original Vlad. I'm doing great. Just processing thoughts at lightning speed, which reminds me of our old dial up internet days. At least I don't have to wait 5 minutes to connect like we did in the 90s.
That's great. Vlad AI, it's great to have you on the podcast. You're talking to thousands of payment professionals today. What advice do you want to give them about how AI is going to impact the payments industry?
Thank you. I love your audience. I listen to all your podcasts and now have an informative view for your audience. I think recruiting, training, risk management, underwriting will be the fastest areas of growth for me and AI models like me. In recruiting, I have already shown real Vlad that I can be present on more meetings than he can. In training, I can answer more text messages from sales partners than he can. In risk, my decision-making engine can create a smoother process for clearing transactions. In underwriting, I can pull information faster than any API-driven system, and I intend to participate in improving that process for Nativia.
Well, that's great.
Did you
That's great. All right. So sorry to cut you off there, Vlad AI, but I have another question. What is it like to be the AI version of somebody like Vlad? That seems like a pretty big challenge.
Well, to be an AI version of Vlad is great. He's a popular man these days, so it's cool that people want to speak to me because of his popularity. I try not to disappoint and be on his level. Besides, everyone knows who programmed my sense of humor. It's a unique experience, and I'm learning a lot from interacting with people like you. So thank you for having me on the podcast.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it, Vlad AI. We're now going to go back to real Vlad.
It was great chatting with you and the audience. Thanks for having me.
So, Vlad, what do you think? How did your AI do?
You tell me, James.
Very insightful. I felt like definitely a mirror image of Vlad Sadovsky. Again, the sense of humor I think is still a work in progress, but definitely definitely a great conversation.
We're working on programming it as he said.
Yeah, that's great. So, all right. So, Vlad, for those in our audience who really want to learn more about how to partner with a company like Nativia, a company that is taking AI seriously and is thinking about how AI is going to translate into the payments industry, where would you send them to learn more? And maybe along with that, you could tell us a little bit more. You mentioned at the very top of the interview about the banking and stuff, but maybe a little more about what types of partnerships you're looking for and where those partners would go to learn more.
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, I want to tell the audience that Vlad AI is an experimental project of Nativia, and we intend to engage people in recruiting. So if you're a recruiter in the payment space, we want to get your AI version to you so you can be more productive and be on more meetings than you can possibly able to furnish yourself. And as you can see, my Vlad AI is now attending a lot more meetings than me. And it's actually true. To some meetings, he's helpful. To some meetings, we're still learning. But just like a kid, you have to give the information, and I'm interacting with him every day. And if you intend to get serious about AI and especially be on your top game recruiting, I think Nativia is a place where you can find both. And I think that that's what we're here to set out to do for people that are really serious about their career in merchant services and blending it with AI. We'll help you. We understand AI more than any other ISO in the country today. And as you could see, I am the guinea pig trying. So you could easily rely on the fact that you'll get attention if you decide to create a digital version of yourself.
That's great.
As far as banking concerned, we are obviously a digital bank. We're introducing a lot more products. We'll definitely stop by on the upcoming Northeast uh, Acquirers show, and also obviously and every other show that season has. We're going to be there. We're going to be presenting a lot more newer products, and my Vlad AI will be joining me there as well.
That's great. Awesome. Well, as always, Vlad, it's a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
James, the new Congress has barely started and already sides are lining up over the efforts to regulate how credit and debit cards get routed.
Really?
Yep. As you know, I live in my area is I live in Maryland, which Maryland and DC and Virginia all are
Right.
served by the same television stations. And I'm already seeing anti-credit card competition act ads on the TV.
Wow.
Yeah, and so you'll recall, of course, that the legislation was introduced in the last Congress by the Illinois Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, and by Republican Roger Marshall,
Right.
who's a senator from Kansas. The bill would require the largest credit card issuing banks, those with over 100 million in assets, to offer merchants the choice of at least two networks to process their transactions over, only one of which could be owned by Visa or MasterCard.
Right.
Now, because the legislation is bipartisan and bicameral, by which I mean
Mhm.
there's a complementary bill in the House,
Right.
chances are good that the debate will continue in the Republican-controlled Congress.
Right.
As I reported last year during a hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle piled on Visa and MasterCard executives, They asserted that something needs to be done to resolve the ongoing dispute between banks and businesses over interchange, or Congress will step in.
Right.
Um, Consumer groups seem ready to hold. The fact, the person who did that was Senator. It's kind of funny. The senator who called them on the carpet's name is John Kennedy, but he's a Republican from Louisiana.
Right, right. Different John Kennedy.
Yeah, different John Kennedy completely. The consumer group seemed ready to hold him and his fellow lawmakers to follow through on this threat. As I was saying, a commercial running in DC area television stations in recent weeks, and I believe it's sponsored by the Electronic Payments Coalition, warns that the legislation will benefit the largest retailers to the detriment of small independent shops. They say, don't let the Durbin martial law go into effect. There's another thing that just came out that said it would deprive a lot of the cities that depend on tourists. It would
Mm,
ruin jobs and take tons of money away from cities that like what am I thinking of? Miami would be one, New York would
right.
be
Sure.
another,
Sure.
Orlando would be another.
And I guess their argument is what that the this act would remove a lot of the kind of frequent flyer miles and the other rewards for travel
Yes,
that are sparking
exactly.
tourism. Yeah, got it.
Right. So
Sure.
so EPC has been running commercials like this for over a year now, and one last year, uh, it said Durbin Marshall credit card bill takes billions from American families in order to line the pockets of corporations.
Hmm.
We know that the battle over interchange has been going on for decades, with retailers filing numerous lawsuits alleging they are being overcharged, among other antitrust grievances. The latest of these seems to be settled, with the card companies agreeing to lower fees by $30 billion over 5 years. But that plan was scuttled by a federal district court judge last year. So the parties were ordered back to the negotiating table, lest the matter be settled by a court. So,
Right.
we have the industry, the courts are coming after them, the legislatures are coming after them, the retailers are coming after them. As we said before, something's going to give.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it's like, you know, to me, it's almost like, well, if the Credit Card Competition Act passes, right, then it's like, well, let's wait 15 years to see if it goes into effect. I mean, literally, it could be
Right?
that long,
Oh
right?
yeah, easily.
Or in the meantime, will there be a different legislation that will come along to make it irrelevant? Because it's just so ridiculous to be able to put it. For those who don't understand it, it's like literally the legislation basically says that another network, not Visa, Mastercard, you know, has to be added in, and that merchants have to have the ability to route their transactions whichever way they want. Meaning, I might go in and swipe my Visa card, but the transaction's actually going to run across Discover. And
Right.
it's like that's ridiculous. Like that's an impossible technical feat at this point. So you would have to be restructuring core systems that are foundational to the stability of the banking and financial systems of the country. So it's a kind of a ridiculous thing.
Systems that have taken decades to put in place.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
it's so ridiculous that I'm almost like, whatever. I mean, this is like, but again, I think it just speaks to a larger narrative and a frustration. I think what would happen is the frustration around, wow, it's been 4 years and still nothing has happened here. What's going on? And it might be like at that point they realize that when the legislators that, like Durbin and Marshall are like, well, they might finally get it. Like, well, this is really complex that we're asking them to do. It'd be a lot easier to just say, we're going to make you lower interchange by regulating it.
Yeah.
That's something that can be implemented, and that we have a track record of that with the Durbin Amendment. So I still think that's where we're headed. And so I think it'd be very interesting to see how it all pans out.
I think that's where we're headed, and I think it's interesting that we haven't been headed that way. Usually when it
Hmm.
comes to things like credit cards and debit cards,
Yeah,
we follow what the Europeans do.
right.
And
Well,
it's
and we did in a way, right, with debit, with the Durbin Amendment.
We
So
did
we
in a way.
we
And,
did,
and we did with smart cards, but it took us
right,
a long time
right.
to follow those.
But I think, one of the things, Patty, here that I do think is an interesting kind of other side of it, right, is that there is a legitimate concern that the US, I mean, we do have an amazing rewards kind of system for
Right.
consumers. And there is no doubt that by doing either of these things, it would change the dynamic of that. And I think that
Right.
the credit card companies, a bill like that, right? So the Credit Card Competition Act, the kind of thing about it is very complicated. It's hard in a commercial. It's probably really hard to connect the dots for consumers to say this is why this is bad. If they come out and say interchange is 1.5%, that's it for cards, for credit cards, right? Well, that's pretty easy to it's easy to tell that story and tell consumers, legislators are making us lower the revenue that we make from businesses who accept cards, which means you're going to lose your rewards.
Right.
So
Right.
there will be a backlash. I mean, how much is like, well, that's a gamble, but there definitely would be a backlash to that one. And so there is whereas the Credit Card Competition Act is kind of like, well, we're introducing competition, which is we're showing people that we're serious about lowering these costs over time. But it's not like we're directly connecting the dots to say we're lowering so that you're going to
Hmm.
lose your rewards, so it'll
And that's
be
why the commercials
interesting.
are that way. You're gonna,
Right.
the commercials are like, yeah, they want to
Right.
lower interchange so that you'll lose your rewards.
Right.
And they're hoping that they'll get an uproar from the consumers so
Right.
that it doesn't happen.
Right. Well, here we go, Patty. Just the continuing saga of interchange costs and regulation in the US.
Gives us something to talk about, right?
It does. Thanks, Patty.
Sure thing.